We've invested a significant amount of time into trying to discover what is the best practice for learning. The big difference between the way we do it and the way most clubs do it, just for anybody watching who doesn't know the way most clubs do it, a typical class would involve a warm-up of anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes where you do jumping jacks and various calisthenics and then possibly some jiu-jitsu related movements. And then you would learn a technique and you would have 5 to 10 minutes to drill that technique. And then you'd learn another technique, sometimes connected, sometimes unconnected. And then if you come in the next day, you might be learning a technique that's absolutely unrelated to the previous technique. So, a guy will show up and be teaching an arm lock one day and a guard pass another day and a choke another day. So you just get this kind of random mishmash of techniques. So you're essentially engaged in a memorization process, which is why it can take so long, is you learn a technique and then you don't come back to it for a while. So what we do differently, first off, we don't do the warm-up. We warm up with technique. So you're like, if you've got an hour and a half of class, my view on it, and this is just a personal preference thing, but I think it's also borne out with like methodology for teaching, is you're paying me to teach you jiu-jitsu. You're not paying me to tell you to run laps. If you want to pay somebody an exorbitant amount of money to get told to run laps, go join a CrossFit gym. Right? That's not what we do. We teach jiu-jitsu. So what we're about is creating as much of an opportunity for you to understand not just the technique we're teaching that day, because the technique that we're teaching that day should just be an expression of general principles. And that's what we do. Probably, if you have to encapsulate it into one sentence, we don't teach jiu-jitsu as a series of techniques. We teach jiu-jitsu as an expression of human movement governed by a set of physical principles that should be universal, because physics is universal. All right, so we teach that jiu-jitsu is a game of frames and levers where you're trying to change frames into levers and levers into frames, or deny your opponent access to levers and frames. And so we're using frames and levers to affect our opponent's alignment, which is made up of base, posture, and structure. And once we do that, we're able to exert control and create vulnerability in our opponent. So throughout the week, throughout the month, you're going to learn at our club a particular movement that expresses a particular principle, and they're all connected. So you're not wondering, oh man, how did that move go on Tuesday, because I'm learning something totally different. The analogy I usually give is, imagine if you went to a history class and on Monday they're talking about the Civil War, on Tuesday they're talking about ancient Greece, on Wednesday they're talking about World War II, and you're having to try to remember all this random crap. It's really hard to learn that way. Right? So you want to create, the way that our memory works is by a method called chunking. So if you can create chunking, which is basically something that's related to something you already know, is easier to chunk onto a body of knowledge than it is to take just a bunch of random things. So it's easier to create chunking when you have these sort of reference points, which are the principles. So the principles would be something like hip and lever control, or it might be internal rotation of the shoulder, or it might be torquing someone's spine to break their posture. And then you can chunk a bunch of techniques onto that, rather than, oh, I'm learning a guillotine over here, I'm learning a sweep over there, that sort of stuff. So we have a very specific curriculum, and we have a very specific principle-based approach that curriculum expresses. So that's what's different. We would spend about 45 minutes to an hour drilling 1 or 2 connected movements, whereas in most academies you'll spend 10 minutes drilling that movement, switching, drilling the movement, switching. It's very hard to actually retain the information.
Unless you're coming from a super school academy, or if you're a competitor that's kind of tested their mettle in competition regularly, so they kind of know where they stand, I think the most challenging part is you come to a school where you realize pretty quickly that there are gaps in my skill set, and they're being exploited pretty significantly by less experienced grapplers. Sometimes you'll have a purple belt or a blue belt that might come in here, and they'll roll with people that usually, by a belt ranking system, they think they'd be able to dominate, but they find that these skills are exploited constantly. And what that does is it kind of creates a new reality for you, where you go, okay, well, this is where I kind of really stand in the world. You want your belt to kind of represent where you are, in the community as a whole, so you can walk into any gym and say, you know, I am this belt, period, not I'm this belt in some gyms and I'm a lower belt in some gyms. And one of the challenging parts is that's very emotionally devastating when you come into a place and you get your ass kicked really badly, not by, you know, some guys, but by everybody. And, you know, you might experience this at some of the super academies, but you also experience this at this academy. And while it's so deflating, it can really break your spirit, because you might think that you're making leaps and bounds and you're putting a lot of time, effort, and energy into getting better, and that you're showing up to classes wherever your school is. And you know, those leaps and bounds are really baby steps in the grand scheme of things. I've been the training partner for Edward during his privates, and it's allowed me to actually see his progress from a more intimate standpoint, so to speak. And it has been quite noticeable at the beginning of our private sessions, as well as during some of the class group sessions. You could see these gaps that, you know, he kept running into these problems over and over again, and no one had really said, this is why you're failing in these regards, and these are the solutions for you to implement. And that's what we've been working on for our private sessions so far, and you can see it. You know, it's not there yet, but you can see that it's making those steps where situations where he might be failing, he's failing less so, because he's able to implement some of the practices and the concepts, and he's thinking through these problems of, this is what I used to do that caused me failure, and this is what I can do now that helps me limit that failure and find more success in these situations. So from my standpoint, I've seen a tremendous amount of progress, and you know, like, looking forward to seeing how far he gets while he's here. Edward and I are roommates, so I get to speak to him while he's here outside of class as well. And it's really nice to have somebody come in with a positive mindset, where this is something that's challenging. Like you're paying to learn something where you kind of get beat down by people, and you get squished, and you get choked, and you get your limbs kind of turned in different positions, and it's challenging, not just on a sport level where you win-lose, but on a personal level where not only do you lose, but you get beat down to a certain degree. And you know, if you're a larger guy or a larger girl or whatever, or if you're someone who's been practicing a long time, and to get beat by somebody smaller than you or less experienced than you in terms of like how long you've been training, can be really hard to digest. And some people, they walk away from that. They go, you know what, you know, I just want to live in my bubble and be fine. But to have a really positive, healthy mindset of being able to say, you know what, today sucked, but tomorrow's going to be a better day, because I'm going to come in and I'm going to come forward with the right mindset, is important. And Edward does that. He comes in with this idea that I'm coming here with a reason to get better. I know that I want to get better, and I'm paying for somebody to give me constructive criticism and feedback on what steps I can take to get to that goal. He's going to be taking these ideas and going back home with it and practicing it on his own, which is incredible, because to have that dedication to seek out information to get better at something, as well as the patience to put in effort in your own time and be somewhat autodidactic, not everybody has that. Some people, they can only find success if they have constant external stimuli, and some people have a more intrinsic ability to do that, and I think that Edward has that. He has a drive inside of him that goes, you know what, I gotta get good at this, and until I meet my standard, I can't stop.
I mean, when I started my jiu-jitsu, and I've been training jiu-jitsu for probably about 3 years, I've not been making the progress I've always wanted to, and I knew something was missing. I saw some apps, jiu-jitsu apps, that seemed really interesting, and so I bought them, and I bought into Rob's style of training. Immediately when I saw his apps, I knew that this was what was missing. I mean, this was really what I needed to do now, because it was very well structured, it was based on principles, and I said, I'm just going to call this guy. So I emailed him, and I called him, and we had a chat, and I said, I'm coming down to Canada, I want to train with you, and that was it. I think, first of all, I think Rob, as a teacher, instructor, he wants to be a good instructor. I mean, he actually sees it like his vocation, no? It's his profession, his calling. And so he's not so much only focused on being good at jiu-jitsu. He's very much well focused on being good as an instructor. So that's very important because you have instructors that they instruct. And Rob doesn't just instruct, he wants to be a good instructor. And so he has systems, he has a methodology, he works on his instructing, he studies, and so you can see that when he's teaching, he has like a profound level of knowledge of jiu-jitsu that I've never seen before. So I think that's like really important. He's also very like invested. So when you're like training with Rob, he's invested. So if he sees you doing something wrong, he'll tell you. And you might be sparring in a class where you have 10 other people that are sparring, but he still has time to get to you and say, you're doing this wrong. And he'll call out, this is wrong, this is wrong. And so you have somebody that wants to be an instructor, he's invested in his students, he has enormous amount of knowledge, and he has created like a system and methodology that actually works. So, I mean, his guys are good. I mean, I came down here and people like the same equivalent time of training as me, and I just got crushed, I mean, if you're looking for like something to measure how good a teacher is, like in jiu-jitsu, I mean, his students. I mean, like his students are like the end result of his work, and if his students are able to do so well, then it's telling you that his system and his methodology and him as an instructor is like it's a total success. Rob understands that jiu-jitsu is just like part of this journey of where you become something as a person. I mean, anybody that has studied jiu-jitsu for a while understands that it's not only about the martial art or fighting and so on, it's about the journey you're taking. And the jiu-jitsu journey is long. I mean, it can take you 10 years, 12 years, 15 years to become a black belt. I mean, depending on the level you aspire to. And so when you have somebody that gets it, that this is like a journey, important journey for you, it really helps. I more or less knew what I would get because based on our conversation on the phone and what I saw in the apps, and I was like just hoping that would be the reality, and it is the reality. I mean, I was looking for like structure and a system, and also I wanted to like eliminate a lot of the rubbish and have like less to focus on. It's instead of having like 100 things to do, I wanted to have like 10 things I should do for the next year. And so with Rob, we've worked out basically, this is the game plan for the year, this is where you need to focus, and if you focus and get good here, you can now go to the next level. And I can't ask for more because that was my main frustration. I came here and I was just doing too many things. And I knew it wasn't working because like with anything I do, and in terms of like learning or creating, I always know that you have to focus on very little and get that done before going to the next step. And in jiu-jitsu, I was not quite able to like figure out what the correct context and sequence was, and nobody was able to give me that information. And so Rob now provided that structure, and like this is based on where you are now in your development, this is where you need to focus. And you get this done, and then now you can go to the next step. And so we got that, and I've got that, so I'm very happy. When you have like guys that are just way ahead of you in many ways, it's sometimes difficult to tell where you are. You know you're progressing, but it's not as obvious as you would like it to be. But like, I mean, there's definitely a change in the first classes when I sparred to the last classes. I mean, I saw a big change, and I started implementing a lot of the things that I saw with Rob, and many of them started working and so on. So I'm pleased with that, but I'm more pleased with the fact that I have now a process and a structure I can take back, and I know that in next year my progress is going to be huge, So I mean, it's nice to have made some progress here, which is okay, but like the progress I'll make in the next year, that's what's really exciting. So, yeah. If you're committed to learning something or a project or whatever it is, and there are gaps in your knowledge base, there's something missing, and you know that. And it is important to like recognize that, because if you do that, then you've more or less solved half of the problem. And now you just need to find the person that can fill those gaps. And that was my case. I knew that there was a huge gap, and nobody in Spain was able to like fill that gap. I mean, I've trained also in Portugal and Spain and like in different clubs and so on. And not that I haven't had good teachers, I've had excellent teachers, but there was still something missing, and I knew I had to fill that gap if I wanted to progress much faster. And so with Rob, I kind of like identified that gap, and I could see that he could fill it. And so, I mean, if it was like the teacher was in Iceland, I would have gone to Iceland. If it was Australia, I would have gone, I don't really care, because like I was focused on filling that gap. And once I saw that Rob could fill it, then I had to go, because I knew otherwise I would waste another year and not make the real progress I want to make. So I know that this is going to happen with many of the things I'm studying. I mean, I might be at a certain stage with my singing or chess, and I feel like something missing, and I'm just going to find that person that can fill that gap, so that will make my progression much faster. Rob's reputation, I mean, he's won competition, but like there are many other instructors in jiu-jitsu that are like world champions, and like you have like big fighters that like have won maybe world championship like 10 times or so. I mean, like, but I wasn't looking for that, because if I was looking for like an ex-world champion, then there's so many other places I would have gone to. I was looking for an instructor. And there's a big difference between being an excellent jiu-jitsu fighter and being an excellent jiu-jitsu instructor. And so I knew that if I went down the route of the best fighter, I'd have the same problem again, because many times you have people that are very good at something, but they don't necessarily know how to teach or show that knowledge. And so Rob is considered one of the best instructors in the world. So that was what I was looking for, not a fighter, an instructor that was very good. So I mean, he wins competitions. He's good at fighting, but I think you need to like figure out, what do you want? A good instructor? You need to find the best instructor. It's different criteria.